Welcome to this week's episode of the Good Luck Club podcast. My guest this week is entrepreneur Spencer Matthews, founder and CEO of Clean Liquor Co. Spencer, thanks for joining us 10 days after having a baby, or watching someone else have a baby, I should say.
It's tough times. It's tough times for fatherhood.
Oh yeah, well thanks so much for taking the time out and joining us, and we'll mark it so that your baby knows that you were on a podcast show talking about them 10 days after they were born.
Absolutely. Lucky girl.
Lucky girl indeed. Well, look, Spencer, maybe we could start off by you kindly telling my audience a little bit about yourself. I only found out about you personally 10 days ago, and now I know everything is about your life, but my audience might not know about you, although I know a lot of people in the world do. But do tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I'm 32 years old. It was my birthday a few days ago, so there you go. Your audience may know me if they're British from having made a lot of questionable television over the last few years. In my early 20s, up until kind of my late 20s, we started a show called Made in Chelsea, which did, I think, far better than we expected it might, and kept a number of us in it for far longer than we thought we would be. And I've done a number of other shows, The Jump, MasterChef, a few other bits and pieces that Brits might recognise before moving into starting my own businesses. The most proud of which I am is what I'm currently doing, the Clean Liquor Company, where we essentially aim to change people's view and consumption of full-strength alcohol by producing very, very low alcohol gin, rum, and vodka, tequila, etc. to come, so that you can enjoy all the kind of flavour and taste of a full-strength alcoholic drink without any negative effects of the alcohol. Point being that people are consuming less and less full-strength alcohol. Being kind of drunk in the center of attention is less popular and cool nowadays than it used to be, especially when I was growing up. And people want choice without compromise. A lot of people drink too much alcohol out of bad habits, essentially, because it's the only thing on offer and has been around for thousands of years. So my belief is that now, when you want a gin and tonic or a rum and coke, you can have it without the alcohol if you feel like it, instead of being that sober person who just drinks water on a night out. And there we go. I can hear my 2-year-old trying to break the door down as well, so you might have something in the
Don't worry, my 3-year-old will be doing the same. That's lockdown in London right now, folks. That's life. So forgive us on Spotify if you've got background music. Hopefully we'll make it worth your time by continuing to listen through the noises. But Spencer, I absolutely love your journey. I wanted to talk a little bit about it and understand how you got to where you are today with the Clean Liquor Company, and what actually made you become an entrepreneur. It's for a lot of my listeners out there who want to become entrepreneurs, I think they like to understand people's personal journeys. So where did it all begin for you? Were your parents entrepreneurs? How did it all happen?
Yeah, my father's, I think I can say, a pretty respected businessman. He came from very humble beginnings up north. He's from Sheffield, and I was born in Grantham. He, by that time, Dad had already done quite well, so I can't pretend to have had some horrible childhood. But Dad's father was a coal miner, and he had pretty much nothing his whole childhood. He was a mechanic and grew up fixing cars, and then became a racing driver. Invested quite early in Plaxton buses, and essentially does bits and pieces in Sheffield, and then later branched out into kind of more property-based deals, until finally becoming the person behind the Eden Rock Hotel in St. Bart's. So a bit of a journey there from him. I've always looked up to him and loved his work ethic and found him to be quite fascinating. He's one of those interesting guys who kind of, you feel, always has quite a sensible answer for most things, and I feel as though I've learned quite a lot from him over the years. Brother's got a excellent work ethic as well, and he works in finance, and I've always looked up to him as well. So I feel as though I've got two strong characters within my family who have managed to touch a level of success going forwards and in the past. But yeah, I think as far as being an entrepreneur goes, technically you're trying to do things that haven't been done before, really. And I've always felt like that's something that I would have wanted to do. Never quite had the drive or ability to kind of put some of my theories to the test before. I drank pretty heavily throughout my 20s. To excess really quite regularly, and that essentially completely slowed me down and kind of dumbed me down as well, in the sense that, as my television career, in inverted commas, was kind of doing okay, I wasn't really kind of creating much in terms of a business or developing an idea or a legacy, should we say. And it was a kind of light bulb moment. My wife is a very strong woman, and it became apparent that my drinking really was getting in the way of my ability to become the person that I wanted to become. I realized, I think Bradley Cooper said it quite well as well. He realized when he was about 30 years old that he simply just wasn't going to achieve his potential if he carried on drinking the way he was drinking. That's exactly what I became afraid of, was that, I was just going to drift into kind of middle-aged, having achieved some things that some people might see as valuable, but essentially that I didn't. I just began to realize that actually, maybe my dad and my wife would never really be fully proud of me unless I completely changed my relationship with alcohol. And so I did. And it was great. And it opened my eyes to this incredible market of sober, curious people who, still want to be involved in a night out, or still want to be able to socialize and enjoy the ritual of drinking an alcoholic beverage or a grown-up drink, but who didn't want the negativity or association of being drunk. It's very much heading down the kind of smoking route. I'm not sure if you smoke. I smoked for a number of years, and ultimately you kind of do that, and that it's really bad for you, but for whatever reason you decide to do it anyway. And there's that addiction piece and just the bad habit piece. And my drinking was, wouldn't say I was addicted to alcohol. It was just a very bad habit that was very present in a lot of my work. I was a forward foreign exchange broker in the city, and ran events, and there was always a good reason to be drinking. And actually, nowadays, millions of people are wise to drinking less or not at all. And so I thought it would be a really exciting opportunity to develop authentic products that essentially reminds you of that alcoholic drink that you may feel like, but without the alcohol.
Yeah, it's a story I can relate to. I mean, I left home and school at 15 years old. I couldn't afford to buy a round, so I used to have water so that I wouldn't feel awkward. But the social effect on you not drinking, it was quite profound for me. People would throw sayings out like, you can't trust someone who doesn't drink, which I never really understood, because you could trust me to drive you home at least, right? But there's a weird almost like you're outside if you don't drink, you're not part of a certain system. So I think it's actually fantastic that you produced this product range, because it's one thing not drinking, but it's another thing still being able to be socially involved in things and have fun, right? So I think saying don't drink at all, which is kind of the route I personally went, is perhaps not the best way. Having an option for people that still want to enjoy that social activity.
It's the only positive life choice that I can think of that has a negative stigma surrounding it. Most people who decide to do something positive with their life, whether it be taking up running or going to the gym or quitting smoking, you receive a kind of pat on the back for it. It's a good thing to be doing to look after your health. But still, to this day, there's a strange stigma around. Well, if you're a woman, for example, you're in a bar and you're not drinking, you must be pregnant, and if you're a guy and you're not drinking, there's a kind of there's a negative connotation with it that surrounds it. So we're looking to make sobriety not only more accessible, but also just more widely understood as being a positive thing. Having said that, I've got absolutely no issues with alcohol. I spent many years having an awful lot of fun drinking alcohol. It just really was beginning to stand in the way of my success. And being successful is quite important to me in terms of kind of business, just for my own peace of mind. I'm a very competitive person. whether that be on the sports field or even with my wife, as you may have seen on some of our TV shows, but also with myself. I want to be optimal. I want to be the best businessman I can be. I want to earn as much money as I can. I want to be able to support my family in the best way possible. I want no limitations in my life. And in order to do that for me, and develop a business that resonates with millions of people all over the world, I couldn't have done that if I wasn't sober. And we haven't quite achieved that yet with the business, but it's certainly moving in the right direction.
Well, I think it's a bit like, for my listeners out there who want to be entrepreneurs, it's a bit like being an athlete. You have to keep practicing at it. You keep having to get good at it. If your mind isn't sharp and you can't absorb, then you can't push yourself forward as a business person, right? So that makes total sense. You mentioned success there, which is an interesting word. For you at this stage in your life, how do you measure success?
It sounds cheesy, obviously, but happiness is obviously a major factor in life. I think it's actually far more relevant the older you get when you have a family. Like looking after yourself is quite easy, I think. I don't know how, independent the average listener is, but when you only have yourself to look after, I found being happy is quite easy. You do what you want when you want to do it. And, that might be a really selfish view, but, ultimately it's quite easy to please yourself. When you have a wife and 2 kids, the happiness and overall feel of the family is obviously very important. You've got to put them first, which of course is a natural thing, I find. But also in a monetary sense, I think it's important to be able to break down, your ideas and your own worth. It's very hard, and it became quite hard for me to value, to put a monetary value on my own worth when you don't really know where you're going. If you're always working kind of for somebody else or for an institution, I've had many jobs where I'm not the boss, and you kind of feel that I felt personally that you put in long hours, boss richer, you end up not essentially enjoying your job because it's unfulfilling, because it's not giving you what you deserve, perhaps. So I've known for some time that I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur and work for myself. It's a risky play. It doesn't always work. 99% of startups fail. But I feel as though if you have really good advice that you can lean on, feeling like you have all the answers is not, you're right for sound?
Yeah, as my son decided to kick off in the middle of a podcast, which is perfect. Absolutely, no, I'm fine. We'll carry on. I think it's all right. He's not asking for me yet, so it's all good.
I feel as though a lot of people nowadays like to feel like they have all the answers, and that's very rarely the case. You need to be completely open to learning and being guided. This business that I've started would not have been possible without proper guidance from key people and individuals, and surrounding myself with people far smarter and experienced than me. I think even Bill Gates has said, he surrounds himself with incredibly smart people, even though he's arguably one of the smartest people in the world. You can't achieve big dreams on your own. Or, I'm sure some people have. That's a generalization, but it's rare. I think we've gone a bit off piece. I don't really know what we were talking about.
No, I think we're talking about success, and I think you've moved on quite rightly, I think, to how perhaps success can be obtained. And I think surrounding yourself with people that make you better, I think is a big part of it. I mean, I think your partner in life is another huge deal you make with no contract often that can be a huge change maker. Sounds like that's been a big influence on you, finding the right partner that's helped you go the right direction.
Are you talking about my wife or my business?
Well, Eva, actually, we could talk about Eva. I was talking about Vogue, your partner in life, but your business partner too. We could talk about that too.
I think Vogue is the first person that I've been with, well, the first and last that I truly kind of need to impress, and I need her to respect me, and I seek it almost kind of passionately. Like if I feel that she's, and it's not a respect thing either. We've always had respect for one another, and we've always been a level playing couple. But half of the things that I end up doing is kind of almost constantly seeking validation from my wife, because I want her to be blown away by the difference in me 2 years ago and me now. It is interesting. I find that the minute you start doing things just yourself is when, you know, you're going to become complacent at some point and just be comfortable where you are. Whereas if you're always striving to be better than an individual, it's easier to achieve your goal.
I think actually for me, you're identifying one of the definitions of love, if you ask me. Like, I have exactly the same feeling with my partner. She's made me better. I often say I wouldn't be successful today if it wasn't for her. And she's made me better. And I think it's because I love her so much. I feel like this, when you truly love someone, you want to improve. People say a leopard can't change its spots. I don't think that's true, actually. You know, the
leopard needs to want to change its spots.
Yeah, or, you know, it's kind of a bad analogy, but you know, there is a time and a stage where you maybe, you know, as an animal, you want to change your habits. You know, you definitely want to improve them. You want to improve yourself and make your partner happy, as you said. And I think that's true love, if you ask me. People that want to stay the same and not evolve, sometimes they've got no one they're trying to impress. It's not a good thing.
You just said evolve. For me, life is all about growing, learning, evolving, becoming more knowledgeable, becoming more modest, becoming better, understanding things that you never cared to understand before, and just growing as a person. And it's interesting because obviously people's development through life doesn't happen at the same time. And so you need to have an element of luck in that your partner, unless she's already, you know, up here, kind of grows with you and develops with you. And I feel like with my changing relationship with alcohol, which has dramatically changed my character and my being, she's grown with me to the point where, you know, we would do anything for one another. We always thought we would, but there's an element of luck. If one person makes positive change in their life and they progress through life at a different rate, it's quite hard to bring people with you. So with that respect, it's panned out really rather beautifully, my relationship with my wife. And I feel, you know, I couldn't be luckier to have her, really. She's the most wonderful mother. And, you know, as I've changed from egocentric reality television personality to really quite busy entrepreneur, you know, businessman who's, you know, diaries full from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. most days. She's just completely managed that change, and you know, she couldn't be better with the kids. And I often feel like, you know, I wish you know, it'd be nice to be at home a bit more, which is essentially why when people ask me about lockdown was fantastic. You know, like, we loved it. We stayed. Obviously, it wasn't, you know, great, and we're deeply remorseful of, you know, anyone who lost anyone during coronavirus, but you know, all it meant for us was I got to do a lot of work from home, got to spend loads of time with my wife and kids, you know, and I felt like I managed to do a bit more for the family instead of just trying to build this empire for us, of course. But to my wife, it just seems like, you know, I go to work all day and they're left with you know, the rest. So it's nice to feel like more of a team. Okay. And it's, you know, I feel as though it's we're about as close as you can be, but I'd say lockdown brought us closer together.
And I think for a lot of people that are listening, I mean, globally, a lot of my listeners in Hong Kong or in New York, and everyone who's been in lockdown, of course, it's not a good time for anyone, but taking the benefit from the difficult situation, I think, is actually quite important to stay positive. And I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think spending time with people's families is also helping people readjust what's important. Going to work every day, coming home late and missing the child's lunchtime or missing a child, putting them to bed, for what? I mean, it's nice to include them, right? I mean, you just mentioned your child in the background making noise, so is mine. This is life. This is real life, right? And it's actually much nicer to include your family in that experience as opposed to have it all separate. So I think everyone can relate to that. It's interesting, earlier you mentioned the concept of like starting your own business is risky. What do you think of this theory that it's actually riskier to work for someone else? I mean, in theory, they're in control of when you go to work and what you do and whether they keep you or not. Actually starting your own business, at least you're in control of your own destiny. What do you think about flipping that?
If anyone asked me if they should start their own business, I would always say that, you know, starting your own business is better than working for somebody else. But without you know, my point was that, and you know, had you spoken to me a year and a half ago, you know, without key people helping my decision making process, I would have been one of those startups that just fails. It's incredibly difficult to understand the logistics of starting a successful business. Successful businesses don't just build themselves. And I think in a strange way, I almost wish that I was joking on mine and Jamie's podcast the other day that we should start a school for a business school for adolescents, because actually, like, there's a number of quite simple. I mean, you're successful and you're a cool guy. You probably know a lot of the things that I've learned over the last couple of years anyway, and I'm sure loads of your listeners already know certain things. But just simple things like, funding the business accordingly, providing, equity perhaps to key individuals with whom the business won't work without, structuring a business, having a plan, past, like I always used to find it really funny when people would show me a business idea and they'd be like, oh, we're going to turn over this in 2025. And you go, how can you possibly know what you're going to be turning over in 5 years? But it's not about the number. It's not about what you're going to turn over in 2025. It's just having a plan so that if you're in front of or behind the plan, or, without my managing director, David Folkman, the business would be in a completely different place. There's one thing having a big, audacious goal and a great idea, and then there's delivering on it and logistically, providing the consumer with a product that is properly packaged and all costs incurred in the shipping of said product, and it arrives, not broken to your door with a ribbon on it, whatever. It all takes a lot more than one might think to start a business. There's always, I see a lot of smart young kids that now, because I've been investing in businesses for some time now, they come to me with a plan and they come with an idea, and it's like, we're going to raise this much money and we're going to do this, and then we're going to use the money from that to do this, and then we're going to use the money from that. And it's like, you've got to take a step back and think of it. The first meeting I ever had about Clean, I was sat with a guy who does some work for Diageo, and he said to me, how much money are you going to raise for this initial stint in round one? How much money are you going to raise? And I was like, oh, well, it's going to cost, this many thousands to do the bottles, and it's going to cost this many thousands to do the labels. And then, to develop the product, it's going to cost this and blah, blah, blah. So I don't know, like 80 grand. And he was like, you're going to need about 3 million quid. And I just went, 3 million quid, like, for what? And he was like, team, marketing, office. But I was like, I don't need an office. He was like, you're going to start a successful business without an office and a team and a plan and a marketing strategy and an in-house, this and an in-house that. And, and I just said, oh no, but we'll come to that, when we've done some turnover. And he was like, you're insane. It doesn't work like that. And I had a bunch of, different meetings with different people, and I was able to sell the concept and the idea into an American venture capital fund who, I openly admitted to them. I was like, I've never been a CEO before. I have no experience running a business whatsoever. All I know is that millions of people need this, millions of people want this. That's the only thing I know. What data do you have to back that up? None. It's just something that I know, and essentially they take these big multi-billion dollar funds take a punt on an idea and a person because they like you, essentially. And then as rounds get bigger and bigger and harder, you're required to know a lot more and be able to provide a lot more information to keep the ball rolling. And that's where we are now. But for me, these last couple of years have been just the most exhilarating kind of learning curve. And I've just loved every second of it. It's like so exciting. And it's like, I'm not sure I would have had the maturity to have understand it all prior to becoming sober. But it did dawn on me. It's like, at no point is any of this stuff taught to you when you're young, or it certainly wasn't taught to me. And I just thought, it's really handy knowing all this stuff. Like now I reckon I could, like, if you came to me with a business idea, I reckon I could tell you with a relative degree of certainty kind of how to give you a better chance of making that business a success from just the things I've learned in the last couple of years. And I think a lot of people go into business without that. They essentially don't minimize their risk. They go in a bit blind and hope for the best in certain situations. And, oh, we only need 10% of my following to buy this for us to be millionaires. And it's like, well, of course, 10% of your following aren't going to fucking buy that. You know what I mean? So it's like, it doesn't, things require a lot more attention to detail than I think people with big ideas assume is just a certainty. Because when you say certain things like, oh, well, you only need 1 in 10 people to buy this, you think, great, that sounds easy, 10%, but actually getting 10% of the country is 6 million people to buy it, why would 6 million people buy what you have to sell? So actually you start to understand that, it's going to be more like 0.1%. And then how do you get them to buy again? And how do you increase that 0.1% to 3%? And, what does that look like? And how much time is that going to take? And anyway, so that's basically what I've been getting up to and learning. And it's really exciting. And to be honest, it gets me rolling out of bed in the morning, from somebody who used to drink really heavily 2 years ago and used to be perfectly happy spending the majority of my morning in bed with the hope of landing some TV show down the line, to, desperately trying to get to the office early and like having to wait until I can officially call people because it's still too early to like get the ball rolling on certain things. My life is so different to how it was. And I guess looping all the way back to our previous point, that's because of my wife. And without her, I would never have had that step change in my life. So if we have some huge exit, on this to Diageo in a few years' time, or AB InBev, or whoever, Pernod, ultimately I can credit my wife for that. It'll be years of hard work that I've put in, but it wouldn't have happened without her. So,
I think you've said so many interesting things there that I hope the audience picked up on. I definitely think that entrepreneurship has become this kind of really overcomplicated thing in some respects. It is sometimes about having the idea and just getting on with it. But like you say, there is a path. I mean, at school, if you want to be a doctor, it's so clear what you have to do. You want to become a lawyer, it's so clear what you have to do. Even if you want to become in banking, I know you worked in the city before, like you mentioned earlier. There's actually kind of a path. But somehow, for some reason, entrepreneurship, it's kind of broken up into accounts over here or marketing over there, as if these things are all separate, when actually what you're saying is quite right. It's actually why I do this podcast. I'm trying to bring people like yourselves, the knowledge that you have, into a platform that people can listen to, and then actually it's not that hard. The theory's there, but some people don't apply it. Even you've just described, how to do it in this podcast. People still don't follow it, and they wonder why they fail, right? And you can de-risk it, to your point.
I actually think that at school, the way to succeed at any school is to be able to retain information better than the bloke or young lady sat next to you. You're not really taught to think outside the box and do things differently. You're taught to stick to how to answer questions and how they've always been answered. And, you get your A star. And, I was that irritating kid at school who would do kind of hardly anything throughout the year, and teachers would just, assume the worst of. And then, 3-4 days before an exam, I'd lock myself in a room and just absolutely study the hell out of, whatever I needed to know for the exam, get an A, and then move on and forget it all. So it's a nightmare because you're not learning in the sense of how you should be learning. But I find, I just think there's so many other ways that kids or young men and women could express their creativity in a kind of business sense. I studied economics for a while at school, didn't do particularly well at economics, but it's all kind of macro, micro stuff. Like there was never a class that, kind of taught you to think outside the box and be different. And, this exists and everybody uses it, but why don't we question it? And it's happening a lot nowadays, with Oatly, with milk, for example, just completely taking on dairy. And now there are 200 million brand revenue plus per year, just killing it, and if you'd pitched oat milk into someone a few years ago, they would have thought you were mad, and it's similar to what we're doing with alcohol-free alcohol. What's the point is the main thing that people say. And that kind of really drives me to make it better, because the point is not to be drunk, and it's really obvious to me. But people, why don't you just drink a Coke? It's like, well, I don't want to drink a Coke. I want to have a gin and tonic without the alcohol. And there's so many great examples of innovative brands that do a really good job with just super simple marketing, who take on stuff that's been around for just years and years. And that's what really excites me, kind of doing stuff differently, trying to find niches in markets that that are almost asleep at the wheel. Fever Tree is a good example. Schweppes had been motoring on here in the UK. Schweppes obviously a much bigger brand than Fever Tree, and they're huge, and they do far larger turnover per year. But here in the UK, they've now lost majority market share to Fever Tree, because Fever Tree just came along and did it differently, and it's like Schweppes woke up from the dead, to try and regain their market share. And it's exciting because actually the world's full of opportunities like that, and you always see you see them all the time. If you go through supermarkets, you can see things that have been around for years that are just like consumed all the time, that are desperately unhealthy, and you just think, must be a way of doing that better. I think health and moderation, for example, the moderation and people drinking less alcohol is completely driven essentially by a desire to be healthier. And I think that's a major factor in the world now. Most people now are keen to be healthier. In fact, all nations in the world are keen to be healthier, apart from America. America's flatlining on the health thing at the moment, but we understand the market to be so big over there due to the population size and the fact that we can't be too different. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many interesting points that you make there, and one of the things I go back to the education piece that you point out. I think one of the things they don't teach in school as well is risk. It's almost as if, getting an A is the only way to succeed. But we all know statistically that C students later end up hiring A students, right? So, but not many A students go on to take risk because they've always been A's. So it's fascinating that the risk piece is missing from school too. But I agree to your point earlier, there is a need for a education earlier on in people's lives. I think now during COVID, with what's happening with the unemployment rates being so high, I'm hoping that will bring about some of that change. You don't need to go work for someone else. You can go work for yourself. It's interesting also. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Spencer.
No, sorry, yeah, just on your point with risk, it's absolutely impossible if being incredibly wealthy is your end goal, which a lot of entrepreneurs, goal is to, well, hopefully change the world and, do things differently, but also essentially, become very wealthy. I feel like it's strange that, people, they don't question certain things. Like when I was growing up and had the great fortune to be in, St. Bart's in the summer, for example, and somebody rolls in on a 200 million quid yacht, it's not for me, it's always been not, oh, wow, that guy's, incredibly rich. It's how did he manage to get that level of wealth to afford that level of luxury? Like in a simple way, you walk down some streets in London, you see a 20 million pound house. The person who lives in that house, even if they earn £1 million a year, you'd have to do that for 40 years after tax, of consistently earning £1 million a year every year, after tax for 40 years to be able to then put all of your money into that house. Like that's not how it works. That person's taken risks and they may have built something, but essentially it's impossible. It's impossible to, if you do determine your success via wealth, it's impossible to be incredibly wealthy without a fairly substantial size for risk, appetite for risk. So the risk piece is really interesting. And of course, ultimately, not to say that anybody who works for anybody else is doing it wrong. A lot of people seek comfort in different ways, but it's incredibly unrisky. To have. When I was working at ICAP, my job is risk free. I do a job for ICAP, and I come every morning and I leave every afternoon, and there's no element of risk. And if I do a big trade that goes really badly wrong, it's no skin off my back. Doesn't really matter. It may lead to me getting fired one day if I keep getting it wrong. But essentially, I'm not risking any degree of my own kind of personal wealth as such. Are you a risk taker?
I definitely am. But I think as you get older, risk gets harder. So that's why this message I think I was push out, which you're talking about too. Do it when you're young. Definitely, you doing it now when you've got 2 kids, taking this risk, it does get harder, right? I mean, I think risk is easier when you're younger, but ironically, when you're younger, you don't realize it. You think you've got plenty of time to work hard later, so you get distracted with other things. But yeah, it's definitely part of my DNA. I mean, I started working at 15 years old, and I didn't party at 20 at all. And now I love my life today. But when I was 20 and working, running my own business, I definitely felt pain. I felt like, was I missing out on something when everyone else is at university having a good time? But that's the thing, isn't it? There's always that kind of high and low. You've got to have some pain to get some gain. It doesn't matter if you're going to the gym or starting a business, right? You've got to make some sort of sacrifice along the way. And So I think risk is important. I also found interesting what you're talking there about the food industry generally. I mean, there's always this thing when I was growing up that fat was bad, for example. And if you'd asked me 20 years ago, something with 0 fat in it, that's absolutely the thing to eat, right? But in reality, fat's actually good for you. It's a type of fat.
Yeah.
So it is interesting how you do get, I think the whole world gets used to what they're told. And it is, I think, a trait of an entrepreneur to also question it. So it sounds like you always had the entrepreneur spirit in you, but you did work for other people, and sounds like you still enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I've always quite enjoyed working and stuff, and it's only a recent thing of mine to kind of want to do stuff all on my own, and I've had very few like lightning bolt moment ideas in my life. I'm not some kind of genius who has loads of different cards up my sleeve by any sense of the word. When I had my first alcohol-free gin and tonic, I knew that the gap in the market was just vast. I'd never heard of it. It'd been around for years. It didn't taste great. And I was just like, how is this not a thing that's everywhere? And I knew that by dedicating years of my life to getting that right would be worth it. That doesn't mean to say that I'm right to do it. A lot, and you get enthusiastic entrepreneurs and founders about all sorts that that wouldn't enthuse others, and sometimes you go, God, wow, am I missing something here? Or or is that guy just really into toilet paper? But it's interesting. I do find that dealing with entrepreneurs is really exciting, and actually I encourage our whole team at Clean to be entrepreneurial and to share their view on everything that we do and to question everything that we do. I think it's incredibly important to question everything. I do find as well that we live in a world where a lot of people are just happy to follow whatever they're told, like queues at airports. You've got me on a rant now. Queues at airports. Often you go to an airport and there's some long kind of snaky queue, and then the line next to them is completely free, and there's people at the front, and you just go down the empty one, and people people would almost rather stand in the queue than go down the empty queue, because they just assume that because there's no one in the empty queue, it has to not be, a real queue. And if you go to the airport and you look at all the counters, there's always someone at a counter that's not doing anything. And there's always, and you just go to them. I'm not trying to teach people how to professionally queue jump here, but there's I don't know. I try to almost never swim with the fish or follow the herd. I always find that if everybody's doing something, there's probably a different way to do it.
But jumping back, I mean, do you think entrepreneurs are born or bred?
I think it is possible to breed an entrepreneur, but I do think having an entrepreneurial father can only help. But having said that, I mean, I haven't really looked into it, to be honest, mate. But I imagine a lot of people are born, with an ability to spot gaps in markets and with an ability to do things that others can't. I think it's quite nice to imagine a world where everyone has equal opportunity, but I don't believe that everyone it has the same way of thinking about things or the same ability to execute a plan. Then again, I don't think it's possible just to teach any kid how to be an entrepreneur. So I think it has to be a pleasant mix of both, I suppose. What do you think?
Yeah, I think everyone's born at zero. I look at my child today, you know, he can be anything. I think we end up molding them in an image that we want, or telling them things that go into their subconscious that make them believe they are or are not possible. There's no such thing as a profile of an entrepreneur. That's my opinion. You know, you look at the Google founders or Mark Zuckerberg, these are not people you describe in a description of what an entrepreneur looks like, right? Someone who's shy, a bit geeky, wants to be more popular at school, comes up with one of the most valuable companies in the world, you know, making one of the most influential companies in the world. You know, so I don't know. I mean, I think we're all born at zero, but I think there is back to the education piece, I think that throughout the process, something happens. Like you say, if you've got a parent who's entrepreneurial, it can maybe either put you off. I've seen that too, where you're like, I don't want to live that life. You know, we were rich, we were poor, we were rich, we were poor, which is basically my family upbringing. And I think that can put you off, because it's who wants to be on that roller coaster ride. But so your environment affects you a lot.
It's luck of the draw who you end up spending time with when you're young as well, and who is in your immediate circle, or who your family knows or whatever. It's who kind of rubs off on you in a positive way as well. It's who you want to be like, right. I suppose. Who kind of floats your boat. You know, if you're, typically speaking, if you're a young kid and you're obsessed with rock stars and musicians, you want to become a rock star or a musician. You know, if you grow up in an environment surrounded by, you know, wealthy businessmen, maybe you want to become a wealthy businessman. You know, who knows?
Did your friend circle change as you've evolved into what you're doing now? Did you find yourself surrounding yourself with a different type of profile, or was it already happening? Everyone else was maturing with you, as you mentioned earlier.
I find it quite difficult to spend any extended periods of time with people that I don't kind of admire in some way. I mean, in my life, I've spent a lot of time with, you know, people who were more similar to how I was before I made a change in my life. That doesn't mean to say that the door's just completely shut. You know, I still spend some time with some of my older friends, but I'm not. I do believe, who was it? Was it Jeff Bezos that said life's too short to spend any time with anyone who's not resourceful? I think that's...
No wonder he's the richest man on the planet.
That's one way of looking at it.
His own wife has to be resourceful until
yeah, exactly. There's one way of looking at it, Jeff. But you know, I think it's it definitely is the case that I'm more excited to spend time with people who are on a more similar path to me. But again, that doesn't mean to say that, you know, no
judgment. But I think it like
out of my...
Yeah, no. Well, that would be...
But yeah, I certainly do find myself spending time with older people now, or people... and my own team, by the way. We built a team of people who obviously I didn't know before this year, and I kind of love and admire most of them. And I obviously, on a daily basis, spend time with them, but actually my social life drifts into spending a bit of time with them as well. And as you know, with kids and what you might call a serious job, it's very difficult to have a very full social life as well. But that's, you know, I said the other day to someone, I would happily take my social life behind the back of the barn and shoot it between the eyes at this stage. I've got a lot more interesting things, in my opinion, going on than having to seek validation on the kind of social circuit. I don't really care too much. It is nice to put your feet up and enjoy, you know, times with old pals and you know, catch up. But at the moment, my kind of purpose and drive is trying to achieve my vision, and that requires an awful lot of time. So I have to say, yeah, you know, it was my birthday the other day, and a lot of my kind of old mates came round and we spent the afternoon together, and it was great. But it did feel like, wow, I haven't seen them in ages. And it's not that I don't value my time or our times together. It's just I think that good friendships last, and you know, ultimately, if I lose 4 or 5 years of my life to clean liquor and getting it right, it will all be for something in the long run, and ultimately those doors will remain open, I'm sure. And if they don't, maybe they weren't great friends in the first place.
That's right. And the truth is, when you have a family as well, like you say, juggling it all, you know, there's only so much you can do. I think people that have kids sometimes also end up not being able to see friends that don't have kids. It's nothing personal, but they don't understand why you have to go to bed at 9:30 p.m.
Yes.
Because that child will wake up 3 times in the night and you have to do your bit. And, you know, friends that don't have kids will not necessarily understand that. And I think it's very similar with entrepreneurship. You know, if you're working till midnight, 1 a.m. on something you feel very passionate about and you're not out partying, unless you've done that and are doing it, people who don't understand, right? So it's something. It's not personal. It's just an evolution or direction.
Yeah, sorry to keep quoting famous entrepreneurs, but Elon Musk said, ultimately, if I put in twice the amount of work that you put in, I'm going to achieve twice as much as you.
Yeah, and it's like 100-hour day kind of 100-hour week model.
Exactly, right?
You've got your own quote, Spencer. I've already got one for you, which is "Don't queue at airports." So people will be throwing that around as the Spencer Matthews insight in business. Do not queue at airports. Yeah. So we
just go down the business class queue, even if you're not in business class.
And say sorry, I didn't realise that this was the business class one. And is it okay now I'm here if I check in?
Exactly. Yeah.
PS can have an upgrade. Yep. Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. But I wanted to ask you a little bit about how the actual mechanism of how you started Clean Liquor, and you mentioned a little bit earlier about having a partner and investors. I know a lot of people that are listening might like to start their own business. Did it just start with an idea and then you started telling people and you got rallied the troops, or how did it play out?
It started with an idea, and I ended up going to the distillery and seeing what it was possible in terms of alcohol-free gin. And we got to a point where I was quite happy with the product, and when I was reasonably happy with the product, I realized that getting it to market is something completely different, and I have no understanding of the alcohol world or even the retail world. Nothing really. My relationships did not stem into the business world per se. So I spoke to a number of key individuals who essentially put me in touch with a gentleman called Justin Hicklin, older guy, full of experience, one of those really calm, cool, kind of considered 60-year-olds who has been around the block a few times and kind of gets it. And he helped me to mold a plan, essentially. He's one of those guys that walks around with one of those kind of A3 pads of paper at all times with a pencil, and kind of he got it out and he drew up a plan of how to structure this business. And actually, I can remember being just really quite impressed with the level of detail that he went into, on day one. He requested some equity for his time were he to stay on as a partner. And we agreed a deal. At the time, I was very protective of my $1 billion idea, call it, whatever I thought it was worth in my mind. And I wanted to give away like next to nothing. I didn't, this is something that it was mine, and I'm happy to kind of build the team, but the idea is mine. And ultimately, you realize quite early on that good people are not going to spend huge chunks of their time and resource without an end game. They will have their opinion on what your business is worth and what the potential end game looks like. And we negotiated a deal which was soon renegotiated, essentially, and ended up with a split that we were both quite comfortable with. And then from there, we brought in a couple of guys that worked for Innocent all the way through to sale to Coca-Cola. And then we grew the team essentially from the 4 of us to now 11 of us, with a plan to make it 28 by the middle of 2021. And we hired a marketing expert from Britvic, and our team now has 3 people from Innocent, a girl from Vita Coco. Just like my whole point at the very beginning was, once I got on board with, right, this is going to be a serious player in a serious space, we need the best people. We interviewed a load of people, and there was this guy or this girl that costs this much, and then there was this guy or this girl that costs a bit less because and we just made the decision quite early on to just go with heavy hitters. I had essentially opened a friends and family round and had hit a bit of a plateau with the raise. There was 400k left of, we agreed to raise 2.1 million pounds. We had got there through David and Justin had developed a business plan that saw us spending 2.1 million pounds over the course of the first 18 months. This to me at the time was all like, what are we going to spend 2 million quid on in 18 months? And they were like, we can assure you this is quite normal. In fact, it's not even a big raise, and I kind of at the time just decided I had to take their word for it. All the while as well, thinking, of that scene from The Social Network when Andrew Garfield signs that that contract that essentially screws him out of the company. Yeah. Would you like to use my pen scene? And he just signs it, without reading
Thinking
it.
that they're his lawyers, yeah.
Well, every time that we were signing anything major, I was thinking like, I've never done this before, so I was having stuff looked over, unlike young Garfield. And anyway, so we've gone off piste again. But when we had about 300-400 grand left of the round, I read an article. Somebody sent me an article that was written by a lady called Ashley Brazier from Lightspeed about beating the 3-tier distribution system in the States and how young entrepreneurs are turning to non-alcoholic variants of popular spirits. And I read it, and it was midnight here, and I went onto the Lightspeed website and I found her contact info, and I asked her if we could talk, and I said, it sounds like your article is literally written about us, this is what we are doing. And she said, why don't you call me in half an hour? And it was 12:30 at this stage, so I spoke to her for an hour in the middle of the night, and she said, well, my partner's in town next week, we'll meet you and we'll have a chat. And that's taking us back to the beginning of the podcast when I said, that I was saying I've never run a company before, but they took a punt and they said at the lunch table that they wanted to invest 2 million quid, and there was only 300 grand left. So I said, will you just fill the 300 grand? And they said, we won't do that. We'll do a minimum of 1 million. So we over-raised. And essentially we're oversubscribed, and I sold more of the company at that stage than I had planned on. But the general consensus was, this is Lightspeed Venture Partners, mate. Like, if they come knocking with 1 million quid, you don't tell them to fuck off type thing. Hello, darling. My little Theodore. Come say hi. Come here. Stutter. Come stutter. Little rat. Stutter. All right, he's on the bed.
Good try. They don't do what you tell them, do they? You could be the CEO of the company, but they don't understand. They don't listen.
Okay. Get over here.
I am the CEO. Come over here.
Yeah, make that. Yeah. So essentially, again, the whole thing was a huge learning curve. I was told, before that meeting that Lightspeed are never going to have, at the stage it was just an idea. We'd never sold a single bottle, blah blah blah, and it all moved quite quickly. And from that point onwards, I had a bit more wind in my sails, a bit more confidence as a CEO. I was a Lightspeed backed founder, and apparently pretty rare that they just dive into an investment like that without doing too much DD. Because I think ultimately she loved the idea, she liked me, and it kind of worked out quite well. And then just building on that, Justin and David helped to build a team that I honestly believe is just incredible, retail specialists, marketing experts, and now we all meet 5 times a week in East Putney in our office, and try and achieve the unachievable. But we're growing extremely quickly. We're just in the middle of closing a £7 million Series A round, and we've only been trading. That's what I've just realised why my laptop's broken. Theodore's got it open on the bed, just kicking the absolute hell out of it.
You lose 2 laptops every year that they're alive. That's what So I'm 3 years in. I'm on my 6th laptop. So yeah, that's the way it is.
Yeah. So essentially, having them in our corner did us a world of good, and we're chatting to other funds now. But I feel, 2 years into my journey, that I'm now, well able to have proper, quite heavy-hitting conversations with, VCs about the space and the opportunity and what we need money for and why and blah, blah, blah. Whereas, I don't mind saying when we first started the company, I wouldn't take a call with, Lightspeed even, who were partners of ours, without Justin or David there, just in case they asked me anything that I wouldn't have the answer to. Whereas now, actually, I prefer to do things on my own because, firstly, I think it looks better, and secondly, it's just easier to get to the point, And no, I certainly feel as though we're doing some really cool stuff. We're launching in Los Angeles in January 2021. which will be amazing. We're looking forward to that.
We have 4 listeners there. I know that for sure. So those 4 listeners better buy it. We've got at least 4 in LA. I know it. So those 4 listeners, please buy when it comes out. I could say 4 million. Who would know? But I have to say, first of all, thank you for sharing your authentic story there. I think what I really get excited about when you tell that story is that it's a journey a lot of people go on, and I think there's a reason why businesses fail in the first year quite often. It's because they don't adapt in the way that you've just explained. They don't admit of what they didn't know. They don't accept that perhaps, for example, they're holding on to equity too tight, when in the end it's about owning 5% of Facebook, not 51% of MySpace, right? So, equity doesn't mean anything. It does and it doesn't. Control means something. Control of your vision, control of what you're doing, and like you say, the culture of the company. These things matter, but equity sometimes gets lost in the mix. And I love your story there, because I think it shows the whole gambit of often what you've just described there. My experience, and I'm on my 18th startup, so I've seen it all, is that, but basically the whole process is often that first year you hold on to the equity, you don't open those doors, you don't bring in that talent, it doesn't go anywhere, and then it closes and you say, well, I had the experience. And then the second time or the third time around, you realize what you've already learned the first time around, which is bring in talented people, let them have a stake in the game, let them own a part of it. It's better that way. They're more loyal, they want to stay the course, and that's such an important lesson that I hope my listeners pick up on, because a lot of entrepreneurs don't learn that early enough.
A couple of lads came in the other day to pitch in what was actually an awesome idea, and I got my team to do a bit of work on it and go back to them with potential shortcomings and where we think they'll fall short of their plan, and essentially they're at the stage where they're just not shifting on what it is that they're willing to give up. And it was well worth making the point that, at the moment, you own 60% and you own 40% of nothing, just so you're aware. Like, the company value is 0. So, if you're looking to turn it into 500 million quid company or billion quid company or whatever you think is achievable in your space, you will not get there with 2 people who, have no experience of building a business, unless you're extremely lucky. But it's, as you just said, owning. We've got there's a couple of billionaires on our books now who've invested quite recently, who are sat on. One of them is buying 1.5% of our company. She obviously doesn't care about, her equity stake in the business. It's more about the potential upside of what that investment can kick off. And that's the way in which people should invest, in my opinion. I have a lot of friends who look at businesses and they go, oh, well, the valuation is really low, so we should get in. And it's like, well, maybe it's low for a reason, and maybe, they need money too much and they don't have a proper plan, or it's the other way, it's the valuation is too high, I'm going to sit this one out. And it's like, but what is the end game in your opinion? Like, every graph from an entrepreneur looks like that, right? But it's like, in your opinion, and I had this discussion with a fund yesterday, if you're looking to invest this amount or that amount or somewhere in between, if you agree with me that the exit is somewhere off the screen over here, what are we even talking about? Who cares? You need to ultimately understand that the end result is possible to achieve it. That's what you're betting on. You're not betting on, trying to secure a stake of a certain size will vary on a business per business basis unless it's valued exactly the same and they're raising exactly the same amount of money. So I often come across people who goes, I require at least a 10% stake. And it's like, but that's absurd.
What does it matter anyway? Why is equity the point? It's not exactly right. Yeah.
It doesn't make any difference, because your 10% stake in something that could be 3x, there could be a 3x exit, or you could have a 1% stake in a 10x exit, and then you're looking at the exact same investments. So it shouldn't really matter. It's the size of the opportunity that matters, and how tapped the market is, and whether or not you believe in the founder and their team, and whether or not they can achieve the things that they say they can achieve.
Totally. I mean, I think the other thing that you've got, I feel, in your business is this purpose, the bigger picture idea of in this case for the Clean Liquor Company, helping people still enjoy a drink without the side effects and the negativity that alcohol can sometimes bring to someone's life. And I think that's a bigger purpose. So, I'd be very proud to own 0.2% in a business that's achieving that. And who cares, if I ever make my money back, if it's going out there and making the world a better place. And it's cheesy, but I think people work for that. I'm sure the staff that used to work at Innocent are now working for you. Innocent's a great brand, right? But they come and work for you. Maybe they feel that you're doing it differently and something that they want to be involved in that maybe, but like my wife, for example, she won't mind me saying, she grew up with a father who was a drunk, and I don't want to blame him. Alcohol was addictive. I definitely feel like that this your business would resonate with her, and therefore affect me as an investor, because why not provide a product out there that gives people that enjoyment of having a nice drink without the side effects or the addiction and so on. So I think that's what you've got, purpose, and that's one thing I always try to tell my audience. Purpose will help you recruit people, right? And it will help you not only recruit people to come and work in the company, but also attract the right type of investors.
Yeah, it's it's certainly a nice story, and it's one of those things that I think is, in 5 years' time, providing that our competition and our own brand, does what we know we can do. It'll be one of those things that you look at that you feel will have existed for 100 years. Like you walk into a bar and there'll be non-alcoholic offerings of the alcoholic stuff, and kind of just makes sense, in the same way that a thin pizza to a big fat thick pizza. There's two of a lot of people, everybody's favorite stuff, right? So
I heard you talking all about pizza on another podcast, by the way, and it got me very hungry. How you used to love to eat 2 thick crust pizzas, and it got me.
The dessert, that's the beauty of it. Deliveroo is still on.
Absolutely. I could talk to you all day long. I'm conscious that you are a CEO of a fast-growing company and you need to get back to work, and plus you've got a 10-day-old baby and family to look after. So I want to let you go. Just before we go, I've got a load of other questions I wanted to ask you. So if I could have you come back on sometime and talk about, I want to talk about education. I want to talk about luck, which ironically is the theme of this podcast. We didn't really get into that too much. I wanted to talk about, lots of other things. I'd love to have you back on. The work-life balance piece I'd like to get further into, and how to get that right. But I'm conscious that we've talked for a long time and our listeners might not stay on. I was actually going to suggest that, by the way, I've really enjoyed speaking with you. And sorry about the technical issues that we had at the beginning. That's almost certainly my fault. No, we're blaming Trump. Everything doesn't work, it's Trump's fault. Yeah, there you go. Zoom, he's probably blocking as we speak. I'll come to yours next time. Sure, yeah, that would be wonderful. Yeah, we would welcome you. Why don't we put some time in? So my diary is going to not completely free up, but free up quite considerably as of middle of this week. We should be closing the round, and then it'll all be just paperwork to go back and forth, which I won't be handling. So I should have several hours quite soon if you want to finish the conversation and do another one. Definitely, I would like that. I think our listeners don't need to listen to our diary schedule. We can talk about that offline, unless our listeners do want to listen to the diary schedule, and we can work out a date right now. I'm sure listeners would love that. Thursday at 5? No. Friday at 2? No. Yeah. I'll get in touch with Dean and we'll sort something out. But yeah, you live in North London, yeah? Yes, I do. Yeah, I won't give the address. Again, people on Spotify might turn up at my home. But yeah, we'll make it work. I want to kind of close the podcast off, but just asking one final question of you. If you went back to your younger self and gave some advice, what would it be? It's hard because you would say, stop drinking and stop partying. But actually, it is the excessive nature of my behavior over my 20s that led me to do this. So I would have done a bit less reality television, probably. So I would have urged myself to try and see a kind of try and understand the end result more, be less. I've always been completely free. I would always just do anything for the sake of it. And, I would always never really think of the consequences of any kind of behavior. I was pretty selfish in my 20s. I cared an awful lot about just myself. Probably wasn't the best son that I could have been. So I would have been, not that I was ever kind of openly nasty to my family, but I would have
been slightly more attentive to my family, I suppose, and been a little bit less self-centered. Very difficult advice to give a young man. If I had come out from the future and given myself that advice, I would have said, "Fuck off, mate." No. But yeah, I think I don't know. There's not there's not too much about my life that I think has gone terribly wrong. But I would have I would have gone sober a couple of years before I did. Providing that didn't have a negative effect on what we're currently doing now, and just being a bit more conscious of my surroundings, perhaps.
I think in your point there, you make a very interesting detail I think people need to understand. A lot of people are searching for purpose and searching for what they're meant to be doing, and a lot of my listeners are like that. Like, I want to start something, but I don't know what's my purpose. But sometimes you need some experience to find that purpose. I know that's true for me. I left school and home at 15 to start a business. I went through all that pain. That's now why in my 40s I'm going back to that 15-year-old and helping them. Like that. You need to go through that process in a way to learn what you're meant to be doing. It's not always instant. That's kind of your point, isn't it? That you wouldn't necessarily change anything because you wouldn't be where you are today, and you're happy with where you are today. So it's all good, right? Wonderful. I'm going to quickly sum up what I've taken away from today's podcast. I think risk is good. Fat is good. Don't queue at airports. Learn on the job, which I think is something you've done tremendously well. Listen and take feedback and push forward on things you believe in, but also listen when you need to. Everybody needs a Justin Hickling in their life. I think that's a really good point. Go with heavy hitters. Such good advice early on. So many people try to basically do it on the cheap, and then they wonder why it doesn't work. Get the best in any way you can. And I think for me, this whole love the idea of like telling people to, when they're younger, less reality TV. I think most people dream of being on a reality TV show, but watching it less and being in it less, probably good advice for the younger generation, and start doing, and you'll learn a lot more by doing, right? But thank you, Spencer, for sharing your insights.
Listen more.
Oh, that's true. Listening's, that's a skill in its own. Thank you for letting us listen to you today, Spencer, and for sharing your insights.
Cheers, dude.
Thank you for listening to the Good Luck Club podcast today. I hope you found Spencer's insights interesting. If you did, follow him on social media, click through to his company and buy his products. On behalf of the Good Luck Club, I'd like to thank you for listening to the podcast show today. We know you have thousands of people, thousands of podcasts even, that you could be listening to, and you take the time out to listen to ours. And we feel exceedingly lucky.
Thanks very much, mate.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time, mate. Awesome to have you on.